Friends, lovers, psychonauts. Here we are with the podcast with my man, Mitch Schultz. What's going on, man?
What's up, Jungle Brother?
Yeah.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. So for those of you who have never been on Netflix at all ever, then you may not know that Mitch Schultz is the creator and director of DMT, The Spirit Molecule, which is one of the most wildly successful psychedelic documentaries ever to exist, I'd have to say.
It's been a great ride, man.
It's been cool.
It's been 3 years now, next week, since the film has been out. And just looking back at that, going, wow, what an interesting ride. Different people, different corners of the world, and you know, now carrying forward into the work that we're doing together.
That's right.
It's wonderful.
That's right.
Yeah,
and
check it out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's amazing. But now we got a new pony in the race. Wachuma.
We do.
Yeah, so me and Mitch, you know, we went down, and I've told this story before. I told it on the JRE, and I've told some of it here. But the very first time we went down to see Don Howard at the Spirit Quest Sanctuary and take this little medicine called wachuma. We didn't know shit about wachuma. Thought it was, we didn't know much. But we brought some cameras down there, and we were going to figure it out. And that's what we did, and let the cameras roll, and now we got a documentary out.
I know, and it was just kind of like, hey, we're going to feel this thing out. We knew that there was something there. We had a great group of people to go down there with, and it was like, let's just roll the cameras and see what we get. But what a pleasantly surprised. I'm happy as hell to get this thing out, because this is the first project that I've put out since the Spirit Molecule. And so sitting back down and editing and getting into that space, man, it was great. So yeah, thanks for opening that up, man.
What for sure, man. For
no
sure.
pun intended.
Yeah, it was a really interesting kind of way that it happened, because we talked about some ideas, but really when we got down there, we just wanted to capture the experience. We wanted to make sure that we were out of the way. At least on the crew part, the crew was out of the way of what was going on for the most part, and we were just there to witness and observe kind of everything that was going on. Witness and allow, baby. That's it. And in doing so, we ended up with this really kind of organic feel to what we captured. This kind of non-invasive feel of just being a part of the jungle and of the ceremony itself.
One of the great things, I think you even said it, this moving meditation, and in some ways that really is what unfolded in the edit room, but also what we're getting back from people, that they feel like they've been able to go down into the forest and they could feel the medicine working through it. And that to me is probably the best feeling, when you can transfer that into the viewing experience for the audience out there. And I feel like we kind of captured that essence of that medicine, or at least a portion of it. So yeah, it was magical, man. And what a great medicine. Now seeing how people are responding to this, and the interest that's starting to pop up, and I think since you talked on Joe's show,
I know.
I heard
Don Howard. He's booked through January already. And probably after the documentary, it's just going to be slammed. But we kind of knew that was coming.
Yeah. But
it's an interesting thing. Wachuma comes from society who lived in a place called Chavin, which is really the cradle of pre-Incan Andean civilization. And it was a sacrament that they offered, to pilgrims who would come visit and people who lived in the area for about 1,000 years. And it was 1,000 years of peace based on the archaeological records in the area, which, you got to think has something in great part due to Huachuma, just based on that kind of feeling that we all got, which is aligning ourselves with the greater good and this sense of brother and sisterhood. Yeah. That it co-creates.
And it's that direct experience, and I think that is kind of what's happening again with psychedelics, but it's that direct mystical experience where you don't have that in between. You don't have to have, and that's Don Howard's whole thing. You need to feel this. You need to go through this and make your own decisions as to what this thing is. I'm not going to tell you what it means, and you need to experience it. You feel it.
Yeah, he always says the medicine is the medium, not the message. That's just the conduit, the translator.
And as
so
a McLuhan fan, I love that too.
Yeah, and really, it felt like that. But so what I was getting at though is this medicine, thrived for 1,000 years, and ayahuasca was around the same time too. But ayahuasca has kind of that tradition carried on with a lot more tenacity than the Huachuma tradition. I mean, there's a couple of practitioners of San Pedro, which is what the church kind of came and they rebranded it so that it fit more within their Catholic paradigm. But the traditional Huachuma way has largely been lost. I mean, there's Don Howard and maybe one or two Huachumeros out there in the world practicing in the archaic, ancient Chavin way. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's I'm sitting here trying to figure out or think about why that would be. What would cause the Huachuma to kind of go out of style, if you will, and ayahuasca to continue to flourish, or at least hold on to some roots and kind of come back up. I think all these medicines, though, and Huachuma being one of them, or San Pedro, is probably of interest to a lot of people, and will probably continue to open up a lot more. It is a little bit tougher to get your hands on, so to speak, and be involved in that, but it's one of those medicines, as we know, that just really taps you in. It's not about seeing visions necessarily or this thing, but it's that
Although you can
being
see,
in the,
you can
you
see
can.
some
It's
see some
right.
shit.
Grinch clouds, for God's sake.
That was real. It was real, everyone. I saw a cloud that looked like a Grinch.
We have
It
pictures.
happened.
We have pictures.
Photographic proof.
But it gives you that you're in the flow,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think you even mentioned that in the documentary, that you are fully aligned with what's going on orally, in between the sounds and the taste and the feel and everything just aligns.
Yeah.
And if you're working comfortably with it, man, it has some great insights.
Absolutely.
Great insights.
I wonder if it has something to do with the location that it was at. I mean, if you're in the jungle, and you're gonna fuck with the tradition, let's say you're whatever force out there that wants to stop traditional native practices and instill it with your own. And you got a choice. You can either go talk to some people who live in the plains or the coast or the mountains, or you can fucking sweat it out into the jungle, getting bit by mosquitoes or whatever. I mean, the jungle itself is kind of like this insulation for the ayahuasca practice. I mean, you got to really beat your way through the bush to get in there and start disrupting, traditions. Yeah. Whereas if it's something like Huachuma, you're like, oh, what are these guys doing? It's a beautiful day. Let's go over there. Let's go over there and fuck that thing up that they're doing out there. So, I think maybe the jungle acted as this kind of insulation to the ayahuasca medicine, whereas, the medicine in the mountains or the plains was a lot easier to access.
I'd love to be able to try that medicine in the mountains, and what that feel is. I mean, just the loss of humidity, or the less humidity has a huge effect on you, because you're just saying the sweat, but it also has that like breathing and that going through that water and that earth thing that was part of that whole ceremonial aspect, but it's alive in a different way.
I know.
And
well, we got some brothers. We got some brothers down there in the mountains and
carrying through for us
on the coast. Yeah. Soldiering up.
Yeah, now that whole thing is a pilgrimage that starts out on the coast, doesn't it? And does it work its way up to the sacred spot of the Chavin? Yeah,
so starts on the coast in Sican and Mochi near, I think, a place called Chiclayo, where they have these old pyramids. And there they do the Masada of power and the Masada of death. And then they move on to Chavin de Huantar, which is out, I think, more in like the plains, like the foothills of the mountains. And then they do, Masada of creativity and the Masada of ascension. So totally different program than what we saw. Because if you watch the documentary, you'll see it's focused on the main basic elements, water, earth, and air, the lower, middle, and upper worlds. And that was, an amazing ceremony. I've been through that twice now. But it'd be really interesting. I couldn't make it happen this time to get down there for the pilgrimage, but it'd be interesting to feel that different environment. And that's, if you're looking out at the world, at the possible utopia that could exist, and you have this medicine like Huachuma that really connects you to your fellow humanity and the earth itself, like imagine all the beautiful places you could do it,
Wow. Yeah.
At a waterfall, at the top of a mountain, at all of these places all over the world, if these oppressive forces weren't restricting where we could do it. But it's
what oppressive forces are you talking about?
I mean, our own minds. I don't know. But yeah, it's such an interesting medicine. What characterizes that that medicine to you? If you were going to describe personally what Huachuma is for you.
Yeah. To me, there's this really strong telepathic element to it, and that telepathy comes through the environment and through nature, and to me, even more so than ayahuasca does. Where even beyond the experience, and even coming back home, 2 weeks, a month later, my mind's open, and it's picking up on things maybe a second before it happens, or minutes, or even days, and there just seems to be a wider view of the world, but also a more focused view. And I know that sounds a little paradoxical, but it opens you up and also kind of brings you into this center, where that flow is just right. And compared to the ayahuasca, there is more of a cleaning out, and as it gets into your little crevices inside of you that's holding a certain energetic field or whatever, it's more of an emotional thing than the wachuma. The wachuma is more of this. Man, it's ineffable, brother. How do you end up putting the words to it? It's hard. I guess the telepathic element to me, I guess, is a big signature, but for the ayahuasca, it's more of an emotional cleansing and kind of cleaning out of old destructive behaviors and thought processes and stuff. So
yeah, it's almost like the ayahuasca is bringing out, I think one of the reasons why ayahuasca is so effective, and that's another documentary that we have coming up because we rolled the cameras there for that. One of the reasons the ayahuasca is so effective at cleansing is that it's working on both the physical and the psycho-spiritual elements of toxicity that you may have, those thought patterns and those things. The DMT is in there, and it's working hard on, reprogramming that circuitry that's creating these patterns and thought patterns and, grief pockets and anger pockets and whatever else you have in your psyche. It's working to release that and connect you with whatever that other thing is out there that DMT connects you with. We have a lot of terminology for that. But at the same time, the vine part, the copy, the cascabel, is going through your body and working to eliminate the physical residue of all that as well. Because I really believe in that connection between your thoughts having some, physical residue, whether it's happy thoughts having a positive residue or these negative depressive thoughts having a negative residue on your body. And it's working on both elements. And I think that's why it's like really the great cleansing medicine of the world, because it's hitting both simultaneously. You're purging everything either out of your ass or your mouth. And at the same time, it's cleaning up what's going on in your psyche.
Yeah. It's looking at the two projects now and the two times that we've been down there, and now that we're in the edit room with the ayahuasca stuff compared to the wachuma, the experience of cutting that completely different story, the feel, the look. There are going to be some commonalities there because we're at the same location and we're working with a lot of the same people, but that signature of the medicine obviously is completely different, and I think people are going to see that once the film, the Aya part comes out compared to what the wachuma is. Just the element too of this kind of that moving meditation kind of thing, as opposed to just getting your ass kicked and cleaned out by ayahuasca, seeing the emotional dump of everything, past childhood traumas all the way up to whatever's going on currently. But just that difference in between the two edits is fascinating to me, and how that literally the medicine comes through that.
Yeah. So when you're in that process, like when you were cutting DMT, did you feel? It seems like, for someone like yourself who's sensitive, you're really kind of working with the vibration of the construct that the topic is about, to a certain degree.
Absolutely. Just in the speed and the pacing of let's just say from wachuma to DMT, the DMT experience being so fast, and there's so much information and so many things just flying by you, and you're trying to just hold on to every little bit that you have just to make sense of any of it. And that was something I wanted to try to put into the film, into DMT. I wanted people to kind of walk out like, what the fuck just happened to me? Just like you come out of a DMT experience. Right. It's quick pacing, it's got quick intercuts, and where with wachuma, we slowed everything down. And being in the edit suite with that one, and looking at the time lapse for instance, we wanted to hold on this shot for a long time. Some of the shots we're holding on for over a minute, and I think with DMT we've got 10-frame slices in here, this little thing.
Well, you're talking about a 12-hour experience versus a 12-minute experience.
Totally. Exactly.
So it makes sense.
And that's a good point. And to your original question, working with those energies, it's important to try to embed that into the pacing of it, the story, the colors, every part of it, because I think that makes the difference. I think that's what people connect to on the other side when they're actually able to watch these and go, oh, okay, I've never done that, but I kind of get a sense of what that might be, and it might just open up a pocket of interest and say, hey, I'll go check that out, see what that's all about. You know?
Yeah, totally. And you can also see, I think one of the things with the wachuma is, the human biology is designed to connect with fellow humans, and I think that's one reason why reality television, or even any kind of acting that's really good, makes such an impact on people, because that has this impact where you feel like the person on screen.
Yeah, empathy, right? You just have to have that empathetic connection.
And actually, in the neurobiology field, they're discovering, mirror neurons, which are specifically designed to mirror the feelings and experience of the person that you're connecting with. So you have something like wachuma, right? And you're watching that, and you're really getting into these characters, and your mirror neurons are firing as you're watching someone on wachuma. So it's very, very similar to like you're actually on the medicine, because it's like I am now connecting with this person. And even, things that you can't describe, subtle processes that your neurons are picking up on, through the mannerisms, through millions of years of evolution that you couldn't even put words to are happening. And I think that's what we're seeing with people who are watching this.
And and then also even looking back, being down there and on set and having Jason and Donald, our camera crew, they weren't under the influence that first round. And talking about some mirroring that's going on, they were like brought right in. Jason's like, I'm high right now. I'm feeling it, and I think it was just that, being around that and just reflecting that energy right back to them and to us. And it's alive, and hopefully that makes it into the media and into the stories, and people feel that. That's
going to be really interesting. I haven't seen any of the ayahuasca footage
yet.
That's going to be really interesting for me, because I remember, we had to watch a bunch of cuts of this wachuma, and every time I would drink the cup, you'd see my face just shudder thinking about it, because there's that kind of reaction like, oh shit, here we go. And when you actually drink, you set yourself almost in a trance, and Don Howard helps do that. They put you in a trance so that, that whole process goes a little smoother. But when you're just, bone, coming off your regular beta level consciousness, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm drinking that.
And that much
puts
of
right
it.
back.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm excited for you to come see this next little round this next week. But totally different vibe. But I don't know. Yeah.
That'll be great. So we've talked, personally and a little bit on the documentary about these medicines as consciousness technologies.
Yeah.
And I go around, I give a little speech about consciousness technologies. But in your eyes, how do you see these fitting into a healthy society?
Sure. It's a tough one, obviously, just because of the knee-jerk reaction that's already built into society, and mainly from the 60s and the LSD. And I noticed a lot of that when I went out to pitch DMT to investors. It's like, well, here, I want to make an independent doc. That's already a hard pitch, but it's about psychedelics. People run the other way. But what I think we're starting to see, and I think this is going to be the biggest, or maybe the easiest transition for some of this, is there's some very substantial healing going on. People that have post-traumatic stress that have gone through hell and are able to work through that, or at least get a glimpse of how to work through some of that. And when that starts to happen and we start to heal some of these deep traumas, not only individually but culturally, I think that starts to open up the eyes a little bit, and people are like, okay, this has never worked before. We're trying all these different things to heal whatever psychological ailment might be with somebody. But with this medicine, people are getting back to some normalcy in their lives, whatever that is, but just more relaxed, comfortable, integrating these things, as Dr. Dan talks about, these traumas that have been part of our lives, and opening up to them and revealing them as opposed to shoving them down. It's going to it's kind of a double-edged sword as far as what comes first, like, okay, we're going to start seeing this healing. People are going to have to start waking up to that. And I think we're starting to see that with some of MAPS research that's actually going into, third round trials, I believe, soon, and seeing a lot of this new psychedelic research opening up. And it's really based around spirituality and healing. And that, I think, is going to really help make the jump. It's not going to be this frivolous, hey, let's go out and get high. It's not going to make this sell, so to speak. And when you start having relatives and family members, friends, that you can see the transformation in their eyes. It's not this, hey, I went out and did this thing, and it's like, no, there's a totally different person or your true self kind of coming out. This is necessary for society. I think it's giving that glimpse of how we can be a better culture and better people, better to each other, better to ourselves. So it's going to take time. I think looking back even over the last decade, when I kind of got back into the psychedelic side of things, there wasn't anybody talking about DMT really back then. Joe had talked a little bit about it on a show a long time ago, and besides him and Terrence, that was probably about it over a decade ago. Now we're seeing it in the New York Times, and we're seeing it all over, and that's actually pretty substantial. A decade and coming around and turning that quick, where we're having...
Oh, you had a little bit to do with that last few years, I think there, Mitch.
But that it's opening up in a pretty broad way, and I think more and more people are coming to it because of the healing aspect.
Yeah, I agree. And you're getting not only this kind of these stories that are like little ripples of water in a pond as one person is transformed, and then people can see that around them and they take that in, but you're also getting the hard science with, as you mentioned, MAPS, the Hefter Institute, all of these different places that are putting out hard scientific data that is really difficult to refute. It's got the safety study element, it's got all of these things, and that's really crucial. I think, one thing that I do want to mention though is as more and more people hear about this and more people have transformative experiences, there's going to be people who are offering medicine who are not qualified to offer the medicine, and we keep calling it medicine, and I think that's a fair analogy, but if it's medicine, then the people who are administering it should be doctors. And we're following the analogy here, so if it's medicine, the person should be doctors, and if they're doctors, they need to have that, great experience, that education. They have to understand, the core principles of any medicine, and some of those principles are like the principle of minimum effective dose, and I think that's something that I've seen personally in, just talking to different people, and the bad instances that I've heard is people who don't understand minimum effective dose. That was something that happened to me when I did that Cambo medicine. I had a really enthusiastic, well-meaning but extremely enthusiastic combo practitioner who wasn't from any traditional sense, but had done it a lot, and his body and his girlfriend's body were covered with dots. They liked it, and they started me off with 11 points, whereas every traditional Cambo practitioner, they're like, 11, it's 5. Yeah. It's always 5. You don't vary from that. So the principle of minimum effective dose was lost because the medicine to them had this kind of holy nature. It was like, this is the holy medicine, so more holy medicine will do a more holy job. And if not, that just means you needed to detox more. Well, that's bullshit. That's a logical fallacy of confirmation bias. At the end, and I think having that, saying like, all right, the medicine, you want to give as little as possible to have an effective experience, and also to understand that everything has an LD50. Like everything becomes poison at a certain amount. It doesn't matter. Tylenol kills 980 people a year, but it also cures a lot of fucking fevers along the way, I mean, everything. Caffeine has the LD50. Caffeine will kill you. Psychedelics will kill you. Like it's not always not always medicine. It's medicine in the right dose. You know what I mean? And I think people get so excited about it that they forget that.
That's the key right there, is there becomes this like almost zealot nature to it. Like,
exactly.
I have seen the light.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show everybody the fucking light. Okay. But it's dangerous. It really is. And there are a lot of issues that are starting to come and open up with that, because a lot of practitioners or people that are well-meaning trying to be practitioners, I think a lot of time, and not knowing the energy of that medicine. and also how to deal with people that might be going through some very, very big experiences. That's where people can get lost. And it's important, really important for people to research. If this is something that does call you, to do your research, go out there and ask questions a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The internet is a great resource. But just doing your due diligence, right?
Absolutely. You got to. And then, not only that, so all right, let's say you even get the dosing right, but in any good doctor, any good situation, there's pre-op and post-op.
Yes.
This is like psychic surgery here, like doing ayahuasca is like getting a fucking liver transplant or something. Like, old bad shit's coming out, new good shit's coming in, So if you're going to do that, there's pre-op and post-op. You have a fucking checklist of what medications are you on, what things are you doing. And the doctor, in this case, could be a shaman or could just be a practitioner. Doctor looks at that. Oh, is there any conflicts? Okay, you ready? All right, you're not going to want to eat anything because you might blah, blah, blah. And there's this whole pre-op, right? And ayahuasca,
even psychological evaluation,
exactly.
Right? Not even just the meds, but
exactly.
Like, where are you?
Where are you? What's going on?
Yeah.
And that's part of the dieta and part of these questionnaires that you see with a great practitioner like Don Howard. I mean, these long forms that you have to fill out and these detailed questions, and then the eye of the wizard himself as you arrive, and he kind of checks you out, and makes sure that, as he probes through in whatever kind of means that he has. And then there's the post-op, and I've seen this go terribly wrong, and I've seen this go, really right in a challenging situation. I mean, some people, even if the setting is right, the medicine is right, and we saw this in the last Huachuma experience. Some people are in a state where they're like two tectonic plates that just one little fracking is going to cause a major earthquake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like any kind of probe is going to cause some major shift to happen, and that could be too much. So, down there at Spirit Quest, we had somebody in the second Huachuma session who had that. He kind of became unglued, and everybody managed the situation perfectly. And Don Howard even had one of his main guys, Ramon, who was stationed outside of this guy's room the entire night, set up a hammock outside his room, and was there 24 hours a day in case this guy had any issues. There was someone like there sleeping outside of his door. It wasn't just like, you hear in these bad ayahuasca stories where it's like, and they sent him back to their room and they found him 2 days later, It was like there was someone stationed right there. And that's how you got to do it. Just like you would in a hospital, where you have 24/7 nurses on call if something in the procedure didn't go exactly right. And I think that's what's so important. And it's also one of the reasons why you don't want to scuba dive alone, and you don't want to fucking take huge psychedelics alone too. I mean, shit can happen.
Yeah.
Like take this shit seriously. It can be amazing medicine. It can save people, sometimes lives, but sometimes at least the life worth living. But there's risk. It's surgery,
And that's something that people should know, that these things can be a slippery slope. The integration afterwards, I think, is one of the biggest things, because when you have these huge experiences, and they can be life-changing to where your entire framework for reality is broken down.
Yeah.
And so you have to piece that thing back together. It's not, and it took me almost 5 years to do that with my first DMT experience. And I didn't have a context for it or a framework. And that's what I think is starting to happen. Those communities are starting to build, and we're starting to say, okay, as Westerners, we don't necessarily have this in our mythology, but we're starting to kind of build these communities and these groups. And even the psychedelic community at large is starting to step up and be like, all right, there's some practices here that are important to make sure that we don't have any major fallouts and things that happened back in the 60s. This isn't for everybody, but the integration part of coming back and being like, all right, how do I understand that I just saw full-fledged beings in front of me, and they're moving in and out of my body and cleaning me out, and it's like, how, especially for a Western mind, it's not used to seeing that. Even just that simple little bit is huge, and it's something that needs to be paid attention to.
Absolutely.
So.
If you actually just hammering this analogy, if you actually just got surgery done, Huachuma is like kind of almost like a heart surgery. You're opening up your heart, and literally that's what it feels like, is your heart is open to new thoughts, new feelings, it's new vulnerability or whatever. If you actually got a heart surgery in the hospital, the doctor would be like, all right, listen, no heavy running, no heavy exercise, keep your diet clean, don't stress yourself, don't put yourself under a bunch of stress, ease back into work. And if you actually got heart surgery, you'd be like,
Yeah,
got it. Like that makes perfect
yeah.
sense. But you go do wachuma and you're like, I'm fucking Superman, and you hop back in and allow any kind of toxic situations you previously had. You just fucking dive back in because you don't have that same respect that you should if it was a real surgery. And I think that knowledge is spreading. Like integration is like that post-op recovery time. Like give yourself a little time. And I'm preaching to myself more than anything because I dive into the shit sandwich head first and start swimming immediately. And it's been challenging, especially after this last experience, because I went so deep in that ayahuasca experience. It was so heavy, and I jumped back in so fast. Yeah. It's been a challenging time for me in the last few months.
And that's exactly it. Like it can be difficult, not only on your psychology but your body and every aspect. So pulling back, knowing who you are, going in slow, it'll be worth it. Just do it. It'll be worth it. So
totally. For sure, man. So what else is I know you got some other stuff going on. We're part of the launch of the Huachuma. You can view it in a few places, but one of them is on your new Mythify site.
Yeah, this is exciting. We've since I released the Spirit Molecule, been thinking about what's next, right? How do we make something as big and even bigger than we did with that film? And we won't hit that sophomore slump. But what started coming to me, and a lot of times through my psychedelic experiences, is this larger story. And part of this was my own personal thing of like, how am I piecing myself back together? Wow, I just had this big experience, spiritual awakening in many ways, but how am I starting to integrate that back into my life? And so I came up with a kind of a 4-part manifesto, kind of an integrated story where through this kind of pure state of being, you could come to that through meditation, you can come to that through psychedelics, any number of different things. But we have to live in this 3D world. So how are we pulling this back? How are we growing our food? How are we treating animals? How are we treating one another? How are we pulling resources? So the next project that'll be coming out will be Ground to Being after the Aya film that we're putting out. And then moving on to how are we celebrating that? How are we celebrating that sense of being and being in this world and this amazing space that we have?
Burning Man,
right?
Bitches.
Burning Man, right? And, music and art and anything that's expressive, how many people want to express but don't get the opportunity to? It's like, man, go do it. And the last part is really going to this conduit and how are we sharing our stories. So I saw this as kind of a big overarching narrative, each one of these different sections having a particular documentary to it, but putting together an interactive experience that you could see on every screen from your mobile device, ultimately all the way to the television, and having a socially conscious kind of narrative built around the human story. How are we redefining who we are as a human species? And how can we do this in a responsible way, in a healthy way, in a happy way that is not just for one individual, but for hopefully all of us on the planet. And that can also open up to this new emerging culture and these new technologies that are opening up to help us kind of lube that transition, because we are going through a major shift in consciousness. But it's not going to all happen overnight, and it's not going to happen to every individual around the planet overnight. So it's a process. And we wanted to come up with a platform that gave a space for people to come in and explore that and feel safe. And so the new site, beta site, is there. The new site will be launching later this year, so we're really excited about that. And it's going to also have an open source aspect. So similar to what we're doing with the Huachuma and the Aya film here, is putting out the media, putting out not just the hour film or the 45-minute or hour and a half film, but all of this other content that I think helps tell the story on a bigger, broader level. Putting that into the hands of our networks, our fans, and letting them make their own stories out of it and sharing it with the world. That this thing starts to splinter, and we really feel like that open source to media gives people an opportunity to come participate in that story. So that's kind of what we're pushing towards, and we've been building the last 3 years and ready to get it out this year. So super excited.
That's awesome, man. All right, I'm going to finish with 2 questions. And they're questions people have heard, but I'm interested to ask you, Mitch. If you could have a conversation with 3 people, any 3 people from the history of the world, the whole history of the world, who would they be?
The first one would, and I don't know if it's an individual necessarily, but what was that transition from our evolutionary predecessor to humanity?
So you want to talk to the aliens?
I've already talked to them. In fact, they're the ones that asked me to come here today.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but what was that? What was that transition from our ancestors?
You might try and
ape
talk to that
lights,
person,
right?
and they might try to eat you, fight you, or fuck you.
That's fine. Yeah, go ahead. Hold my own sometimes.
Yeah. All right. You want to scrap, dog? I know jujitsu, motherfucker. You know jujitsu? I doubt
I know
it.
Aubrey. It's like, he got my back over here. I've just always been fascinated what that evolutionary process is and how we became this thing called human, right? What is that? And so I've wanted to kind of go back into that space. Somebody else, Tesla, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
You know, I still blown away by this man, his insights in a lot of the horrible things that I think actually happened to him, but his stick-to-itiveness and his this is what I'm doing, and you may not understand what it is, and there's probably still a lot of science that doesn't understand some of that technology, but a fascinating character to me in history. That's two, huh?
Got one more.
Yeah, one more.
One more. Go deep.
I've already talked to this person.
Yeah.
And he's actually sitting on the couch back there. Steve McDonald, my business partner. So he'd be that third person, and so I get a regular conversation with him, and he helps me navigate the others.
Right on.
Yeah,
That's awesome, man.
yeah.
And a question that you asked enough people.
You're flipping it back on me. I love it. Okay.
Yeah. If you could provide one message to all the billions of people on the world at the same time, what would it be?
I would say open up to the possibilities that there is more than just human intelligence on this planet. And that can come through not only other animals, but plant life. I think also getting a broader sense, or trying to open up to a broader sense of who we are. And that means even that shot from space, looking back at planet Earth when we first jumped out to the moon. That kind of ideal, and that wow, it's just this little blue thing floating out in big space. I think it's important for us to pull back and even start looking up. You know, Joe said this, and that simple bit of looking up at the sky can have a profound effect on us, and also humble you in a way that can help direct your life. So I would say open up to these larger possibilities of intelligence and energies around you, as well as humbling, looking up and humbling ourselves.
Yeah. Right on, my brother.
Yeah.
Well, everybody out there, please check out our new documentary. You can view it at mythify.com, mythaphi.com. Or go to a very cute little domain that I have set up temporarily. It's Aubrey Mark, MARC.US.
I love it.
And you can see it there as well. Just put in your email. You can watch it for free. If you want to download it, there's also a link there too, and it's $2 if you want to download it and keep
the
it.
Packages of all these wonderful time lapse.
And you got some time lapse and aerial footage packages on there too that you can play around with. So please check that out. Check Mitch out as well, and keep an eye on the Mythify site, because there's going to be some good shit coming out. Much love, people. Catch up again soon.
Thanks.
Peace.
Yeah, peace.